Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and this time we're talking about the now confirmed Pokemon Presents for February 27th, 2025. It will be airing at 6 AM Pacific Time, 9 AM Eastern Time. I for sure will be live streaming it, and I am eagerly anticipating this presentation. This Presents may be everything us Pokemon fans have been waiting for, and that's what I want to get into today. But before going forward, let me take this moment to point out that I am aiming to reach 50,000 subscribers by the time the Switch 2 launches. So if you find yourself enjoying my content, I would appreciate it if you could subscribe and hit that notification bell. So this Pokemon Presents next week is going to be a very big deal. There's a lot that could be here that would be exciting for the fan base. But the main thing that I think all of us are expecting is Pokemon Legends ZA. Last year, for the earlier Pokemon Presents, they told us about this game. They gave us the initial announcement. It was essentially just a teaser trailer, no real gameplay details or anything like that. And so there's a lot of mystery about this game. But now, we're probably going to see footage of this game, get a proper trailer, and likely also at least a release window. But I wouldn't be surprised if we get a specific release date. I don't think this game is going to be a game we have to wait all the way until November to get. I know a lot of mainline Pokemon games developed by Game Freak come out in November or around that period of time, but I think this is a very different situation. First off, we just went a whole year without a mainline Pokemon release. That hasn't happened for a very, very long time. The pattern is finally breaking. Perhaps the curse is finally breaking because we've been getting so many annual Pokemon releases. It kind of seems like they haven't been giving these different projects enough time to fully bake and become quality, polished games. And so we've seen some atrocities like the issues with Scarlet and Violet. Yes, I did enjoy a lot of elements about Scarlet and Violet, but there were also a lot of issues. And so having this long way break is actually kind of a breath of fresh air, and I find myself missing Pokemon again. And so I'm actually more excited than usual for this Pokemon Presents and for this upcoming next mainline Pokemon game. And so essentially this game has been getting more time to be prepared to be a better quality game, and they may not need to wait all the way until the very end of the year. But then on top of that, Legends Arceus, the first Legends game, came out in January. So we've already seen that the Legends games don't necessarily follow the typical Pokemon mainline release pattern. And then on top of that, we have seen some merchandising stuff that may suggest the Mega Evolution things will be dropping around the summertime, which may mean that's around when we see Pokemon Legends ZA come out. Which I do think makes a lot of sense, because we have heard from the Terra leaks that there may actually be a Switch 2 version for Pokemon Legends ZA. Now, that hasn't been confirmed. We do know that there is something real about this, but does that mean it will come to market? That part remains to be seen. But with the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct happening on April 2nd, and a lot of us thinking that the console will be coming out very soon, perhaps May or June, Legends ZA coming out, yes for Switch 1, but also having a Switch 2 version in the later summer might be an ideal period of time for this game to release, because not only is it going to see strong Switch 1 sales, but it's also going to be a significant Pokemon game available early on for a next generation of Nintendo. And so even if Legends ZA on Switch 2 doesn't have a massive improvement, but if it's at least like an upscale that runs a little bit better, that's going to be a big thing. We haven't seen Game Freak jump on the bandwagon for a next generation of Nintendo so early on before. But I think it's something that a lot of fans would appreciate. Those fans that will be the early adopters for Switch 2 but also want to play Pokemon, this could be a best case scenario. But speaking more on what we might learn of Legends ZA, I think we're probably going to learn about at least the starters. We're going to get somewhat of a decent working understanding of the overall gameplay loop, and we're going to see how it differentiates itself from Legends Arceus. We're going to see the visual style as well. There's so much about this game that we're going to learn. It's going to be a lot to take in at first, but what's also going to be interesting about it, especially if this game's coming out sometime in the summer or not later into the year, the big marketing campaign may kick off, and we may start getting regular updates on this game every week or so. Or maybe at least on a per month basis. Point is that this Pokemon Presents may open the floodgates for official Legends ZA news, and there's going to be so much to learn about this game, and given how long we've been waiting, I think there's going to be a lot of excitement there. But going beyond Legends ZA, what else might this presentation have? Well, quite frankly, my primary and really only main expectation is Legends ZA. I think it's probably easy to predict that there will be some mention of other Pokemon mobile games, maybe an update on the Pokemon TCG Pocket app, or Pokemon Unite, or Pokemon Masters, or Pokemon Go, or all of the above. Those sorts of things always show up. There's a very good chance they will make mention of another sort of Pokemon anime project or update on something else going on within that realm. But I think what a lot of Pokemon fans are curious about, beyond Pokemon Legends ZA and these other typical updates, is if there's going to be other game announcements, like new game announcements. Will there be another spin-off announced? Will there be another mainline game announced? And in terms of the mainline game stuff, when Legends Arceus came out, we had also gotten Pokemon Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl 2 months beforehand in that typical November time slot back in 2021, and so we find ourselves essentially 4 years removed from that situation, at least when the game was announced. And so, could ILCA have been cooking up another Pokemon remake of some kind that will be ready for this year? And quite frankly, I think there's a very good chance. I personally don't even want to see this because I want to see Pokemon Legends ZA get all the spotlight, but there's a very good chance that ILCA will have something ready to put out this year. And I think there's an opportunity where we see a Pokemon Presents later into the year where they then announce this remake and it comes out maybe still in the holiday with a shorter advertising turnaround, or it comes out early on in 2026 with still enough of a healthy gap for Generation 10 to take the spotlight at the end of 2026. But regardless, I do think there's a really good chance that within the next year or so, we see another mainline release that's developed by ILCA. Now, there's the other possibility that maybe they sit on whatever ILCA has been working on, and that comes out in a different year. Maybe they save it so Game Freak can get more time to work on their own projects, as opposed to being forced to come out with a game almost every year. And so say maybe ILCA has been working on a Generation 5 remake, maybe we don't see that until 2028 or 2029 once they need a little bit of a break from the launch of Generation 10, which at this point seems like years away, and I think some people will start arguing, well, by that point, ILCA will be ready for another release, and that may be the case. And so I do think there's a decent chance we see something from them now, although it might not be a Generation 5 remake, maybe they go back to Generation 2. We never did get our Let's Go Johto. Now, I'm not saying we get Let's Go Johto, but it might be nice to see some sort of HD version of Generation 2. And on that note, given how late we are into the generation of Pokemon, and how long we've been asking to see something like this, maybe something is mentioned on the classic Pokemon games making it over to Nintendo Switch Online or the Switch eShop in some way. Maybe it also includes Silver, Gold, and Crystal, or even Generation 3. There are rumors circulating about a classic collection, but I think that's just, random stuff on forum posts, nothing with any real meat in terms of credibility. But at some point or another, I do think they need to make sure that these older Pokemon games are made available for the Switch ecosystem. Even if it's not on Switch 2, I think eventually these games have to come. And I would assume that they would still come to Switch 1 even if Switch 2 has released, unless we're talking about years from now. But it really seems like this might be a fantastic opportunity to put these classic games out there. There is no guarantee that Switch 2 will be as successful as Switch 1, and so really it might make a lot of sense to put out at least the original generation on Switch 1 in some way, and perhaps the first few generations. And I'm not talking about remakes here, I'm just talking about the original games, maybe upscaled in some way, as we see a lot of NSO games are, but beyond that, really not much else. Of course, with these Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games, there should be ways to transfer, battle, and move these Pokemon over to Pokemon Home. But beyond that, I wouldn't expect any other major adaptations. So to be clear, I'm not predicting this, but I do feel like at some point or another, they gotta come over. But circling back to something else I alluded to, what about a spin-off? Could there be a spin-off announced or multiple spin-offs announced? And the answer is yes, absolutely, there could be spin-offs announced, and it's kind of been a while since we've gotten one. Now, maybe some of that has to do with the fact that we are at the end of the Switch 1 generation, and they may want to wait until we're deeper into the Switch 2 generation. But you could also argue to the contrary. If there's not going to be anything but a Legends ZA mainline release, maybe they would want to have another spin-off as well. I'm always going to dream about a Pokémon Stadium 3 or something along those lines. A game focused on just making the spectacle of the battle the best it can be, which also might be really great for the competitive circuit. And actually, something interesting about this possibility is that given that we are entering the Switch 2 generation and there is a Switch 2 version of this, if the idea is about the spectacle and making the Pokemon fights look as impressive as they can be, having a Switch 2 version that looks and runs better, maybe even going up to a 4K resolution, that would be really awesome. And it would be even more useful for the competitive circuit, because then the battles would be presented in the most interesting, exciting way possible, which is going to make the game more appealing to a larger audience for people to watch, increasing the allure of the competitive game. But that's just one of many possibilities of something they could do. Something we also have been waiting on for a very long time is a new mystery dungeon game, so maybe we get something like that, or what if there's just a new spin-off idea we haven't considered before? There are a lot of options, a great variety of things that could very much appeal to the overall Pokemon fan base, but the main thing, to me, is Legends ZA, and it having gone an extra year of time to be polished, I think says a lot about what the quality of this game will be, and that has me extremely excited for what we'll see next week. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart, thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.